What happens when time ceases to exist? When the relentless chatter of the mind falls completely silent and human consciousness finally merges with the divine? This is the ancient mystery of Samadhi, the absolute peak of human evolution. It is not just a state of peace, it is a profound biological and spiritual rebirth. The breath stills. The heavy karmas of countless lifetimes dissolve into nothingness. You no longer just observe the universe, you become it. But the journey to the bottom of this infinite ocean is fierce. It demands the ultimate surrender. The shading of worldly illusions, of ego, and of deeply rooted desires. History whispers of those who unlocked this ultimate power. When the great city of Kashi was brought to its knees by a merciless drought, grand rituals and the pride of kings failed. But a humble cobbler, Saint Ravidas, simply closed his eyes and slipped into Samadhi. He bypassed all worldly illusions. He didn't ask the heavens for rain. He simply merged his pure consciousness with the suffering of the people. And the skies tore open. A torrential downpour washed away the drought and the arrogance of a king. This is the true power of complete surrender. Are you ready to dive into the infinite?
Today's subject is the secret of Samadhi and Mergence for the evolution of human consciousness. That is, the mystery of Samadhi, or a state of ecstasy, and Mergence for the evolution of mankind. To understand it in summary, Samadhi is the supreme, ultimate state. True self-realization occurs only after attaining Samadhi, or a state of ecstasy. The accumulated righteous actions from past lives can smoothly and easily guide an individual into this state of Samadhi. In the state of Samadhi, or a state of ecstasy, the mind becomes an absolute void. All thoughts cease to exist. The physical body rests completely in the state of sthita prajna, the unshakable equanimity and stillness. Upon entering Samadhi, all accumulated karmic debts are instantly reduced to zero. It is then that the ultimate and most abundant evolution of consciousness takes place. In this exalted state, the spiritual seeker begins to experience their own consciousness residing within every single living being. Following Samadhi, one encounters new and profound spiritual experiences every single day. Novel realizations continuously unfold. After Samadhi, or a state of ecstasy, your old friends and worldly attachments naturally fall away. The individual's entire way of life transforms completely. Post-Samadhi, a person lives solely for the Supreme Lord, and their very existence is lived utterly immersed within the divine. This is an incredibly magnificent and supreme state of being. Now, understand this in detail. Samadhi, or a state of ecstasy, is the final step of meditation. Beyond this point, the endless evolution of this meditative state becomes entirely possible. Once you enter Samadhi, it is as if you have taken a plunge into an infinite ocean. From then on, you can travel in any direction and explore any depth. There will be no end to it. There will be no limit to your knowledge, nor will there be any bound to your supreme intellect. After attaining Samadhi or a state of ecstasy, the evolution of an individual's spiritual competence reaches its absolute peak. The individual rises above time and space, becoming firmly established in a timeless state. They dwell in the eternal, residing constantly with the Supreme Lord. They no longer experience the passage of time. They remain in a state of such profound bliss that an ordinary person cannot even begin to comprehend or imagine it. Following Samadhi, a person's entire ledger of accumulated karma is reduced to absolute zero. This occurs because the intense, brilliant light of Samadhi profoundly impacts the mind, purifying it completely. In that pure state, no thoughts remain, all old, stored thoughts and impressions are completely burnt to ashes. You become absolutely and inherently pure. If a person enters the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy every day, they live their life as a Jivan Mukta, one who is liberated while still in the physical body. Their karmic ledger always remains at absolute zero. In this exalted state, the individual is completely freed from the binding cycle of action and reaction. A state of absolute void is achieved. The mind becomes entirely empty and still. The very moment the mind becomes a void in Samadhi or a state of ecstasy, the individual comes into the direct, intimate presence of pure consciousness. This is precisely the state where the true evolution of consciousness occurs. The perception of time and space completely vanishes in the state of Samadhi. This is the state of Akal, that is timelessness. Akal simply means the state of being entirely one with the Supreme Soul. The individual rises far above the dimensions of time and space, and their individual consciousness completely merges with the consciousness of the Lord. When your consciousness unites with the Lord's consciousness, human consciousness gradually evolves until it becomes exactly like the divine consciousness. You attain the profound realization of the ultimate witness. It is then that you can truly experience that there is absolutely no difference between you and the Supreme Lord. You realize that everything is unfolding within you, exactly as it unfolds within the divine. When human consciousness becomes one with the divine consciousness, there are moments when the human mind briefly regains a flicker of worldly awareness, even while resting in the divine. This subtle return of awareness occurs only when it becomes absolutely necessary for the physical body to release or take a breath. This happens because a human being is fundamentally a physical creature in which the soul resides. However, when human consciousness and the Lord's consciousness merge absolutely and completely, worldly awareness is reduced to an absolute void. This state is much like a person deeply engrossed in watching a film, to the point where they become entirely one with the movie. In that profound immersion, they lose all sense of time. They remain completely unaware of how much time has passed, feeling as if the film playing before them is the unfolding saga of their own life. Similarly, A person in Samadhi or a state of ecstasy exists in the state of timelessness. They have absolutely no perception of time, whether 1 hour has passed or 3. Consider the profound example of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, who remained entirely submerged in the river for 3 whole days before emerging. While beneath the water, he was completely enveloped in the state of Akal. He had entirely transcended time. In this exalted state, his physical breath was suspended at 0. Yet, he was in a state of absolute, supreme awakeness. His individual consciousness had flawlessly merged with the Mahachetna, the supreme consciousness of the Lord. He had become one with eternity. His physical body rested in the perfect state of sthita prajna, that is unshakable, absolute stillness, and his breath was completely still. This is the ultimate, magnificent state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. There is absolutely no state of bliss greater or more profound than this. The true awakening and evolution of human consciousness is experienced only during the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy and in the profound state that follows it. It is exclusively within Samadhi that the physical body undergoes a complete rejuvenation and transformation. The individual entirely transitions from the state of an ordinary human into a supreme, awakened being. During Samadhi, the individual completely stops breathing. Because the breath is suspended, the concentration of carbon dioxide within the body naturally increases. As the carbon dioxide levels rise, the acidity within the body decreases, and the alkalinity increases. As you can well understand, when the body's acidity is reduced and its alkalinity is high, all diseases are completely eradicated and reduced to 0. This is an absolutely magnificent state. This is precisely the reason why you will never see a true yogi in a state of ill health. Furthermore, in this suspended state, the hemoglobin in the blood automatically releases its stored oxygen. This phenomenon has also been scientifically established. The body continually absorbs this released oxygen, allowing the individual to remain fully alive despite the absence of external breathing. In Samadhi or a state of ecstasy, the physical body rests in perfect stillness and performs no physical labor. Consequently, the body's demand for oxygen is drastically reduced. The subtle amount of oxygen released by the hemoglobin into the bloodstream is entirely sufficient to sustain life, ensuring that the physical body remains in a state of absolute, perfect health. This is because in the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy, there is no expenditure of energy whatsoever. Everything is perfectly still. Every single organ of the body rests in a state of absolute stillness. Only the human heart continues to function, and even that operates at an extremely minimal, basal state. The energy expended by the heart is almost negligible because the heartbeat slows down drastically. In fact, in the case of great, exalted yogis, The heart may stop beating entirely, yet they remain perfectly alive. In simple terms, all the organs of the physical body are in a state of complete and absolute rest, preventing any dissipation of energy from any part of the system. Because of this perfect conservation, body weight remains completely stable or drops only negligibly, despite the absolute absence of food intake. The vital power that sustains you during this time is derived from two sources: the subtle oxygen released internally by your hemoglobin, and the profound cosmic energy that your very cells absorb directly from the universe. It is entirely upon this divine and cosmic energy that you continue to live and thrive. In this state, the individual is completely awakened and dwells purely in supreme consciousness. Consciousness itself is the very form of the Lord, and this consciousness requires absolutely no physical energy to sustain itself. The individual is in a state of profound and absolute rest. Their mind is completely void, and all thoughts are reduced to zero. By remaining perfectly centered on a single point, the mind becomes empty, allowing consciousness to gradually and magnificently evolve to its highest peak. You can understand even more deeply what else transpires in this state. Samadhi, or a state of ecstasy, is the final rung on the ladder of the spiritual journey. Beyond this, the individual ascends to the ultimate state of liberation. They become entirely free of all desires. They move and exist solely in harmonious union with the power of Brahman, the supreme reality. And when an individual traverses life through the power of Supreme, they are freed from the cycle of rebirth. This happens because all their karma or actions is reduced to zero. Their karmic ledger is completely wiped clean, and they become utterly desireless. There is no lust, no craving, and no longing of any kind remaining within them. This is the most magnificent, supreme state. All worldly desires become absolute zero. And an individual completely devoid of desire is the very embodiment of the Lord Himself. That is exactly why it is said, man minus desire is equal to God. If all desires within a person are entirely extinguished, why would they ever be forced to take birth again? They have already merged into the form of the divine. If such a liberated soul does reincarnate, it happens exclusively by the direct command of the Lord. Their rebirth is not dictated by the compulsion of karma, because their karma is already zero. They do not take birth to suffer or reap the fruits of past actions, for neither karma nor desires exist in them anymore. They incarnate solely according to the divine will to fulfill a specific mission. And from the very beginning, they are fully, perfectly, and consciously aware of the exact purpose of their birth and the sacred task entrusted to them. The state of Samadhi is typically attained only after the dedicated spiritual practice of many lifetimes. However, through the profound grace of the Supreme Lord, unwavering determination, divine love, and pure devotion, It can be attained at any moment. By the magnificent grace of the divine, Samadhi or a state of ecstasy can even be achieved in a single lifetime, within this very life. This is entirely possible if an individual possesses absolute resolve, lives constantly in the presence of the Lord, and holds the singular life goal of merging and living as one with the divine. It is only when a person is filled to the brim with unconditional love and devotion that attaining the state of Samadhi becomes a reality. In this elevated state, one's lifestyle becomes absolutely pure. There is no room for jealousy, malice, or hatred. There are no lustful cravings and no worldly desires. Through such profound inner purity, an individual effortlessly enters the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. If a person exhibits a complete, natural inclination toward the Lord right from birth, it is a primary sign that this individual is destined to descend into the state of Samadhi during their lifetime. All of this is made possible by the accumulated righteous karma of many previous births. This, in itself, is the great grace of the Lord. Building upon this past karma, the individual is naturally drawn toward deep meditation and divine devotion. Spiritual discipline does not feel like a burden, it unfolds entirely naturally for them. It is then that entering the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy in this life becomes a simple and accessible path. It is then that the Lord actively attracts and pulls the seeker toward Himself. The divine forces of the Lord are supremely intelligent. They completely understand your innermost feelings and true intentions, simply because our very existence is contained within the Lord. The Supreme Lord knows absolutely everything. If our accumulated past karma is entirely reduced to zero and we have achieved complete inner purity, then the magnificent state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy can emerge with the utmost ease. Now, understand what happens after Samadhi. If a person has attained the state of Samadhi, what profound changes unfold in their life? Post-Samadhi, an individual's entire thought process is radically transformed. Their old way of thinking simply ceases to exist. Their entire lifestyle changes. The dietary habits they previously enjoyed undergo a complete shift. Now, they naturally and exclusively prefer sattvic means, pure, simple, and spiritually elevating food. Whereas they previously spent their time seeking entertainment, watching films, or hanging out with friends, they now find absolutely no pleasure in any of these worldly activities. Even if every comfort and convenience is readily available to them, they have no desire to waste their time on entertainment. It holds no appeal because they have been completely transformed from within. Because of this profound shift, their relatives, their spouse, and their children may no longer relate to them or treat them the same way, simply because the individual is no longer the person they used to be. The seeker now deeply prefers solitude and being alone with their own consciousness. Being in crowds or functioning within groups does not appeal to them in the slightest. In this elevated state, their old friends and relatives often turn away and leave them. No one from their past feels entirely comfortable or happy around them anymore. Why? Because their old friends and relatives are still living deeply embedded in the worldly state, whereas this individual has ascended to a much higher, supreme spiritual plane. How could they possibly understand or appreciate them now? So, the worldly connections naturally fall away. This separation happens because the seeker's inherent nature and their vibrational frequencies have completely changed. Now, they themselves cannot maintain the same worldly interest in others as they did before. They only wish to associate with other lovers of the divine. They only want to be in places where genuine, profound discourse about the Lord takes place. Their interest in worldly entertainment drops to absolute zero. However, and this is crucial, they do not impose any forced restrictions upon themselves. They are not deliberately trying to control or suppress their desires. Rather, their very nature has organically changed. Even if the most indulgent and luxurious foods are placed right in front of them, the inner desire to consume them simply does not arise. They naturally partake only in pure, sattvic nourishment. No external or forced discipline controls them. It is their own inner Supreme Lord who naturally places them upon a specific path, and they simply and effortlessly walk that path. He no longer holds any interest in earning or accumulating wealth. His emotional attachment and clinging to family members, even to his wife and children, diminishes significantly. However, it is crucial to understand that he continues to take complete and perfect care of them. He harbors no binding attachment or possessiveness, yet he fulfills his responsibilities and cares for them fully in every possible way. Now, he effortlessly tolerates the anger and misbehavior of others. He deeply understands that the Supreme Lord himself is orchestrating these actions through them, using these encounters simply to make him even stronger and more resilient. He now dwells entirely within himself, constantly immersed in his own consciousness. By remaining continually centered in his own consciousness, his spiritual awareness evolves even further. He remains in a state of absolute stillness, entirely free from ordinary worldly thoughts. He channels his profound feelings and thoughts regarding the divine by writing books, presenting his inner truth through the written word. If he does not find like-minded companions or true seekers who genuinely desire self-realization, he dedicates his divine energy entirely to writing. However, if the Lord places him in a satsang or spiritual gathering, he conducts it with overflowing love and devotion, deeply wishing to elevate others to his own awakened state. He never hesitates or restrains himself when it comes to utilizing his wealth for the divine. He spends his resources with immense joy on spiritual endeavors and the Lord's work. He completely surrenders and dedicates his entire life to the Supreme Lord. In this profound way, his entire existence and way of life are fundamentally transformed after attaining Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. Now, understand that Samadhi or a state of ecstasy is fundamentally of two types. One is Savikalpa Samadhi, and the other is Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Savikalpa Samadhi occurs only after a state of deep meditation. It is the initial, preliminary stage that follows profound meditation. This state of Savikalpa Samadhi fluctuates, it comes and goes. It is very much like a person repeatedly dipping their head into the water and then pulling it back out to breathe. However, if a person remains submerged in that water of consciousness for an extended period, experiences absolutely no discomfort in doing so, and deeply desires to remain in that very state of immersion, then Savikalpa Samadhi naturally transforms into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. At this point, the individual feels no rush, urgency, or restlessness. This is because, in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, they exist in a completely breathless state, resting perfectly in the absolute stillness of Sthita Prajna. When human consciousness is able to remain seamlessly united with the supreme consciousness of the Lord for a prolonged, uninterrupted duration, you must understand that the seeker has successfully entered Nirvikalpa Samadhi. In this exalted state, the individual has absolutely no perception of time. Their breath operates at an absolute minimum, virtually zero, and this profound samadhi or a state of ecstasy is broken only when their physical body absolutely compels the necessity to take a breath. Now, let us move forward and understand the various methods and pathways through which an individual can actually attain this ultimate state of samadhi or a state of ecstasy. You are already well acquainted with these methods. So, in summary, it is appropriate to state that according to the first method, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Samadhi is the ultimate destination. The 8 limbs outlined in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras are Yam or restraints, Niyama or observances, Asana or physical postures, Pranayam or breath control, Pratyahara or withdrawal of the senses, Dharana or focused concentration, Dhyana or meditation, and finally, Samadhi. This initial attainment is Savikalpa Samadhi, and it is only from here that one transcends into the permanent state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. The second method is the practice of continuous mindfulness on the breath. If you keep your attention entirely on your breath, your breathing will gradually slow down until it reaches absolute zero. When the breath becomes still, the mind, too, becomes a complete void. It is in this profound emptiness that consciousness truly evolves, and you directly experience the inner witness. Following this realization, the state of Shivatva, the pure, supreme consciousness, dawns upon you. When Shivatva arises and you become completely empty, the dormant power of Kundalini, the divine energy of Goddess Parvati, awakens. It ascends from your Muladhara chakra, piercing through the Svadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata, Vishuddhi, and Agya chakras, until it finally reaches the Sahasrara or crown chakra. It is there, within the Sahasrara, that the ultimate mystical union of God Shiva and Goddess Shakti takes place, triggering a divine cosmic dance or say Devik Tandav. This sacred dance draws you directly into the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. Your awakened inner energy merges seamlessly with the infinite energy of the universe, and the ultimate state of Samadhi descends upon you. In this magnificent state, human consciousness unites with Supreme Cosmic Consciousness and becomes its very embodiment. The breath is suspended at absolute zero. Thoughts completely cease to exist, and the seeker perceives the presence of the divine everywhere and in everything. In essence, the meditator, having ascended to the supreme state of pure, divine love, finally attains the ultimate liberation of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. Besides the formal paths of yoga and breathwork, there are several other methods to reach Samadhi. Dancing in pure divine love also empties the mind, bringing it to an absolute void, and the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy arises spontaneously. Similarly, through the chanting of mantras, by becoming entirely one with the energetic power of the mantra, the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy is easily attained. That is, when the mind becomes completely immersed in the mantra and loses its separate identity, it dissolves into Samadhi. Furthermore, singing in profound devotion to the Lord also silences the mind's chatter. When there is complete, absolute absorption in the singing, Samadhi naturally occurs. Ultimately, Samadhi or a state of ecstasy is simply the state of becoming one with the Lord. The method to achieve this can be anything. It all depends entirely upon your own inherent nature, temperament, and mental inclinations. Understand it beautifully like this: the complete dissolving of sugar into milk is exactly what absolute Samadhi is. Before the sugar dissolves completely, it first becomes wet in the milk. This represents a human entering the initial stage of divine devotion. This is the preliminary phase. But afterward, when the merging is absolute, when the sugar completely and invisibly dissolves into the milk so that they cannot be separated, that is the ultimate state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. From another perspective, the path of wisdom outlines 4 distinct stages. Shravan means deeply listening to the ultimate truth. Manan means constant contemplation of that truth. Nididhyasan means complete meditative assimilation of the truth. And finally, Samadhi. This, too, is a profound and direct pathway through which you can reach the ultimate destination. Through any of these methods, an individual can descend into Samadhi or a state of ecstasy by the blessings and immense grace of the Lord. All that is truly required is deep faith, pure love, intense devotion, and unwavering resolve. If you are absolutely pure from within, the Lord Himself acts as a magnet and draws you toward Him. It is this very magnetic, divine pull of the Supreme Lord that ultimately carries an individual into the eternal embrace of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. Now, understand that in the pursuit of reaching Samadhi, an individual must also face numerous formidable difficulties. Some of these challenges are as follows. A person's old karmic impressions and conditioned tendencies create severe obstacles in entering Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. They simply do not allow the seeker to enter that supreme state. Worldly desires and human cravings prevent the individual from even descending into basic meditation. Reaching Samadhi, therefore, remains a very distant dream. The intense desires of lust, anger, greed, and attachment keep the seeker tightly coiled like venomous snakes. To conquer and achieve victory over all of these vices can easily take several lifetimes. However, if you possess an unwavering, ironclad resolve, and your singular desire is to attain the Lord, then these monumental problems can effortlessly be reduced to zero in your life. Samadhi or a state of ecstasy is a journey of reaching the absolute depths of the ocean. You can imagine for yourself just how incredibly difficult it must be to plunge into the deepest abyss of the ocean, and to do so while remaining fully alive. To achieve this, you must have absolute mastery and control over your breath. Only when you are perfectly established in the state of unshakable, absolute stillness will you be able to descend into those oceanic depths with ease. Samadhi or a state of ecstasy is a journey into darkness and utter solitude. It is difficult to even estimate the sheer number of afflictions, inner demons, and obstacles that might arise along this solitary path. The seeker continuously falls, then rises, and then falls once again. But if there is firm determination, they eventually find their footing and begin to walk the path once more. Ultimately, it is the magnetic pull of the Lord, His divine magnetic power, pure love, and the seeker's unshakable faith that carries the individual through the darkness and safely delivers them to the Supreme Lord. The journey of Samadhi is akin to making the river Ganga flow backward from the plains all the way up to Gangotri, back to the exact, pristine origin from which it first emerged. The Ganga naturally flows downwards and effortlessly reaches the sea on its own. However, consciously experiencing that ultimate source and traveling back to it before dissolving into the ocean is the true mark of absolute spiritual evolution. It means that before entirely merging into the vast sea, the Ganga voluntarily returns to Gangotri. In spiritual terms, this means that once an individual has consciously reached their absolute origin, the very divine source from which their soul was born, they can then choose to merge into the infinite cosmic ocean entirely by their own free will. At this exalted stage, the entire cycle of life and death becomes a mere divine play for them. It is as if the Ganga possesses the supreme will to travel back to Gangotri and then flow into the ocean whenever it pleases. In the exact same way, the realized soul views birth and death merely as a cosmic game. They possess the ultimate freedom to ascend to their divine origin at will, and to dissolve completely into the Supreme Self at will. They rise entirely above the involuntary bondage of life and death. You can intuitively feel for yourself just how magnificently supreme and unimaginably great this ultimate state truly is. Now, understand the immense benefits an individual gains from entering Samadhi, and why a person would even wish to pursue it. Not everyone desires to go into Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. Only the one who deeply wishes to experience the cosmos in its entirety seeks this state. This is because the wealth, majesty, and splendor of the universe are absolutely infinite. In contrast, the wealth of the physical, material world is strictly limited to food, clothing, shelter, and entertainment. Beyond these basics, there is no other worldly wealth to be found. If a person desires to experience the infinite majesty of the cosmos alongside the wealth of the world, only then do they choose this arduous path. It is certainly not an easy road. But simply consider for yourself how incredibly magnificent this is. If you can attain the supreme, infinite wealth of the universe as well as the wealth of the world, what could possibly be greater than this? If a person merely wishes to live exclusively within the confines of the material world, then there is absolutely no need for them to seek Samadhi. However, when an individual becomes completely satiated with food, clothing, shelter, and grand worldly luxuries, when they realize there is nothing left to achieve or desire in this material realm, only then do they embark upon this spiritual path. And when they do, they walk it with absolute resolve and unwavering firmness. At this stage, no worldly obstacles or material temptations can pull them backward. Their sole, unshakable resolve becomes the attainment of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. Only then can they truly sustain the journey toward it. When an individual has experienced and exhausted worldly wealth over the course of many lifetimes and has become utterly satiated, only then do they deeply desire to enter the divine state of Samadhi, willingly accepting any kind of hardship along the way. As they walk this path, simply by virtue of treading this sacred journey, they transform into the very embodiment of the Lord, becoming omnipotent like the divine. This is exactly why only those who have completely enjoyed and exhausted their desire for worldly wealth truly wish to move toward the Supreme Lord. Prime examples of such souls are Mahatma Buddha and Lord Mahavir. There have been countless other such exalted individuals who embarked upon this divine path and never once looked back. Now, understand further what kind of divine majesty is attained by entering Samadhi or a state of ecstasy, and what profound inner benefits naturally unfold. These treasures are not acquired in any physical or material form. Upon entering the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy, mystical, unknown powers awaken within the individual, making them absolutely and supremely powerful. They attain such immense power that they could even bring a dead person back to life. However, they never interfere with or violate the laws of destiny and cosmic order, even though they possess the absolute capability to do so. They dwell in a state of absolute, unbroken peace. They know exactly why everything is happening in the universe. They do not actively interfere or physically do anything to change it, yet they possess perfect knowledge of it all. This is because the entirety of existence is unfolding completely within them. They experience everything. They become a silent, conscious partner with the ultimate doer, that is, they are completely one with the Supreme Lord. They are fully aware and possess perfect foreknowledge of what is destined to happen. Exactly like the Lord, they view all of life simply as a divine cosmic play. Everything transpires within them. They remain absolutely whole and complete in every conceivable way. Yet, they never display or show off these profound powers, nor do they desire anything at all, because they already possess absolutely everything. In essence, they become the very master of the universe. They are completely devoid of any worldly cravings. They exist purely by surrendering themselves entirely to that supreme power. And it is only in this magnificent state of absolute, unwavering surrender that they eventually relinquish their physical life. Now, you can understand Samadhi or a state of ecstasy even more deeply through a short story. This great tale demonstrates that a person established in Samadhi dwells constantly with the inner witness. The most magnificent, unparalleled powers emerge within such a being. They themselves are not even aware of the sheer magnitude of the immense powers assimilated within them. The very moment they merely perceive or experience the sufferings of society, those sufferings are automatically resolved. Understand just how magnificent this state is. If a realized soul simply observes distress, the distress resolves itself without them having to do anything. This is an entirely indescribable state. This is exactly what it means to be truly one with the Supreme Lord. This is a very ancient incident. At that time, Kashi was an incredibly prosperous and powerful city. Its king was just and fair, and his subjects lived happily. He had profound faith in the scholars and the devotees of the Lord. In a great, holy city like Kashi, he frequently organized grand yagyas or fire sacrifices and havans. He also convened grand religious assemblies from time to time. Seeing his own capabilities reflected everywhere in the kingdom, and observing his subjects living in perfect peace, wealth, and prosperity, a deep arrogance took root within him. He became immensely proud, believing that it was solely because of him that every person in the kingdom was thriving and living peacefully. he began to firmly believe that all this abundance was happening exclusively because of his own greatness. Outwardly, it seemed as though he was doing all these pious acts for the Lord, because that was the image he projected. But inwardly, his ego and his arrogance had reached an absolute peak. By the decree of destiny, a severe famine once struck Kashi. It did not rain for several years. The public and every single person in his kingdom became completely destitute, starving and desperate for even a single grain of food. Seeing this miserable state of his subjects, the king became incredibly restless and distressed. Tears would fill his eyes upon witnessing such mass suffering, yet he was entirely powerless to do anything. So, after some time, consulting with the great scholars and high priests, he organized a massive, 7-day yajna. The grand ritual was conducted and completed with absolute, meticulous adherence to all scriptural rules and procedures. Yet, the clouds did not pour. It still did not rain. At that time, Saint Ravidas ji resided right there in Kashi. The noblemen who were well aware of Ravidas' immense spiritual glory and familiar with his greatness advised the king. They suggested that he should go into the holy presence of Ravidas with deep reverence and pray to him, as that might finally resolve the crisis. So ultimately, casting aside his arrogance and completely dissolving his ego, the king surrendered at the lotus feet of Saint Ravidas. With profound faith, he made his desperate plea. Then Ravidas said to him, "Nothing will be achieved through all these external displays, by conducting grand yajnas and rituals. You are doing all of this merely on the surface. All worldly ostentations and religious shows exist only on the superficial level. The Supreme Lord, however, resides in the profound depths of your heart. But currently, in the depths of your heart, it is only arrogance that fully resides. Deep down, you are deeply egotistical, holding on to the illusion that it was solely because of you that your subjects were happy and prosperous. Now that your subjects are suffering and starving, what are you actually able to do? Even now, you are attempting to please the Lord through mere external showmanship. The Lord has absolutely no interest in these empty ostentations. The Lord dwells within pure consciousness. Consciousness itself is the Lord, and that is His true abode. Therefore, Ravidas ji instructed him, pray to the Lord while remaining completely centered in the state of the witness, and the Lord will most certainly hear your prayer. Pray from the very depths of your heart. There is absolutely no need for any external show or ritual to reach Him. When Ravidas ji spoke these words, the entire gathering sat down beside him with peaceful, completely thoughtless minds. Everyone began to silently meditate upon the Lord. All of Kashi, which had been desperate and yearning for even a single drop of water, gathered around Ravidas' humble hut. Prayers to the divine were offered through flowing streams of tears. Everyone prayed to the Lord with profound faith, devotion, and the sheer, heartfelt agony of their suffering. It was then that Saint Ravidas entered the absolute state of Samadhi, or a state of ecstasy. He became completely oblivious to his physical surroundings. He remained in deep Samadhi for a very long time, entirely unattached to and unaware of the worldly realm. When he finally opened his eyes, dark rain clouds had gathered in every direction. Soon, everyone was bathing in the Lord's rain. The entire city rejoiced in the torrential downpour. This was the sheer miracle of Samadhi. This is the magnificent power of the innermost core of Samadhi, or a state of ecstasy. Saint Ravidas used to craft shoes even while resting in the state of Samadhi. He performed his worldly labor while fully absorbed in the divine state. To his awakened vision, every physical body was nothing more than leather, a mere outer covering for the soul. Just as he would soak leather in water for his craft, in this moment, he invoked the cosmic waters from the deepest core of his heart, and the heavens opened up in a torrential downpour. Everyone was completely satiated by that life-giving water. The entire city witnessed the absolute glory and power of Saint Ravidas' Samadhi. Everyone experienced the supreme divine form he assumed in that exalted state, realizing a profound ultimate truth: it is the Supreme Lord, acting through the realized Master, who truly does everything. Because in Samadhi they become completely one with the Lord, the entire universe is then orchestrated directly through them. They desire absolutely nothing for themselves, simply because they already contain everything within them. They wish only for the well-being and upliftment of others. If an individual permanently established in the state of Samadhi or a state of ecstasy feels the agony of others and expresses pure compassion for them, that suffering is resolved in a mere fraction of a moment. Samadhi is an unimaginably magnificent state. The very moment a pure thought arises within their awakened consciousness, it instantly manifests exactly as it appeared. This is a supreme state. To attain this exalted state, an individual might have to traverse through several lifetimes, or it can be achieved in a very short span of time. This timing depends entirely upon the individual's profound faith, unwavering devotion, and absolute inner purity. Therefore, the ultimate, singular goal of a human being's life must be to attain Samadhi or a state of ecstasy. If it is not achieved in this current lifetime, it will surely be attained in the next, or perhaps the one after that. However, if you possess a firm, ironclad resolve and absolute surrender, then reaching this ultimate destination is entirely possible in a single, miraculous moment. Thank you.